Hi everyone. It looks like we just have a couple people, but a lot of people usually when I record these, they're looking to watch them later. So we had quite a sign up. So I'm assuming most people are going to be watching this later. But Lindsay, Carrie coming in. Good to see you. Don't feel like you have to turn on your camera. Most of this is me talking the whole time. If you want to, you're welcome to. It's always nice to see faces, but as an introvert myself, I don't always turn on my own camera when I attend events online. So I totally get it. So no pressure. You guys I have the chat open. You're more than welcome to use it as you desire. So we're going to get started because we have 30 minutes and I want to make the most out of it. So in case you don't know, I'm Megan. And you probably have come across something on Instagram or through the podcast. So I'm just glad to meet you guys and to be here with you and to offer these free workshops once a month. If you haven't gone and checked out the rest of them, there's one every single month this entire year, and I have them all planned out. So you are welcome to sign up for any and all of them that interest you. This one specifically is about garden planning. And so next month is all about seed starting, and then we just go down from there. So you can just head to community.freshexchange.com and click the free workshop section on the community page. So those events are all open to anyone at any time. So I hope you guys check it out. And because this whole month in our community is all about garden planning, we're doing a garden planning intensive, and every single Monday, we do a session that's live and recorded where we go through a certain part of the process of designing a garden. We also do homework, and I'm not always excited about that word, but my goal is to utilize it to hold you accountable till you get to the end of the session and the whole month, and you have a garden plan and you have a list of plants and you have plant timings and everything. So, and you've done it with a community of people who are also sharing their ideas and their feedback with you. So, in their knowledge. So, it's really, really helpful. And we did it last year and we expanded it a little more this year because it was so popular amongst the community. So, if you're interested, at the end of the session, I'm going to give you guys details about how you can get a discount and enjoy some of it yourself if you would like to this month. So let's jump in. So today we're going to be covering 3 of my top tips for garden planning. Each one of these tips is part of one of the live sessions that I'm doing with the Garden Intensive. So I'm also doing podcasts that also talk about a couple of these, but not all of them. So if you want to dig in deeper, you can always check out those things as well. We'll cover as much of it, and then you guys can feel free to ask questions at the end. So we're just going to jump in with tip number 1. So I like to begin all of my garden planning personally by being reflective, by stepping back and saying, what worked, what didn't work. And then I also start every garden planning session every year with the same question. How do I want to feel at the end of the season? And it sounds kind of heady to be thinking that far in advance. But what I've learned is that when we ask that question, it comes to us what we really want out of our garden that year. Because it can get really overwhelming to look at so many pictures, so many inspirational ideas, and ultimately, what is it that you want to do? I don't know why my camera does this sometimes. So I'm sorry if it is a little weird. But I love this question. And every single year, I find that I have a different answer. Some years I'm like, I really want to feel confident growing X this year. Or I really want to feel calm and rested and like I really enjoyed myself in my garden. And it's really been cool to hear other people's things because they are different. Every single person's like feeling that they want to have is different. And what I've heard from people in the past is that this is really good to offer sort of like a why, like from a business term, you talk about like, what is my why? We should do the same thing with our gardens because there's so many options, so many ideas, and this helps us refine it to really understand what we want. And I think it's an important place to start. So I highly suggest writing this question down and just really thinking about it and asking yourself, being truthful, meditating on it, because before you even put any pen to paper. Now, when you are ready to put pen to paper, whether you have a brand new garden or you are just starting out and starting to add, maybe last year you did more of a container garden, you want to move into in-ground, and you're trying to figure out location. And when we're talking about location is incredibly important, but understanding sunlight in the winter can be incredibly hard. I'm sure if you're even probably feeling that right now. I'm not sure where you guys are located, but depending on where you are, sunlight can be kind of challenging to understand because it's going to shift pretty dramatically for the most part once we get to the growing season. Here in the north, that dramatic shift is pretty intense. So we go from, sunrise at like 8:30, 9 o'clock or 9 a.m. to 4:30, 5 p.m. sunset. And then we move all the way to like 4:30 a.m. sunrise. The sun starts appearing in the sky really low to still getting light at 11 p.m. So it's so dramatic. So how do you figure that out? So there's a really rough way to just kind of utilize some things. And this dramatic shift changes depending on where you are in proximity to the equator, to the 45th parallel, to all these things. And yes, this involves a little bit of math and geometry, but I really, since I am somebody who's dyslexic and really struggled with those sort of classes in high school and college, I wanted to simplify this process because I think it's really confusing, but it doesn't have to be. And from all my research and from personal observation and more, and working on a farm, what I have learned is that the sun, we really can utilize the solstices and our equinoxes to help us understand the proximity and location of the sun and how it will shift. And one of those things is to understand is that right like this time of year or during the winter solstice to like midwinter, the sun is going to lean more south from southeast to southwest. As we move to the equinoxes, the fall and the spring equinox, it's going to be exactly due east, due west. Equinox means equal, basically. That's what the term is intended to be. And then the summer solstice, the sun is going to be the furthest northwest to northeast to northwest in terms of its setting location. So you can see the further north you live, the more dramatic that shift in the sunlight will be, where the further south you go, the more even that's going to be throughout the year. So these shifts are important in determining so many things, because right now, even for me, that sun sets, way over on the southwest side of our land behind a lot of trees. But come summer, it's moved way beyond the trees and we're getting all that late sunset because it's northwest, which is we have most of our garden exposed to the northwest and west. So this also helps us determine like where to put arches. Should our arches face, usually I like to suggest arches face east to west, like in the terms of the opening, because then if you're going to plant anything, the shade around it is not going to be as dramatic. Things like that are really helpful to help determine those things. You also have to take into consideration your trees. They don't probably right now have a lot of leaves on them. So you got to take that into account if you're in a new space. What is it going to look like in spring and summer? What is it going to feel like when the sun moves across? And this all really depends on paying attention around you. Now, you do have some great tools probably around you. If you have neighbors that also garden, it's really good to ask them questions. They are incredibly helpful. You got to think about the shadows your house will make, the shadows other outbuildings may make. All these things are to take into consideration. Just because an area gets shade doesn't mean that it's a bad spot to plant things. It just means you have to reconsider some of the things you might plant, especially the further north you go. So for instance, we have an area that gets some shade, but by the time the sun sets at night in the summer, it's gotten that adequate 6 to 8 hours of direct sun that it needs in order to grow things like beans, watermelon, melons in general, pumpkins, tomatoes. Peppers really need 10 to 12 hours. So they can be really tricky and they need a lot of heat. So, and they need a long maturity span. So all these things can be taken into consideration, but in an area maybe you get more shade and it's a little bit milder in terms of temperature because of that shade, you've created a microclimate. Now that will help you determine, okay, maybe I should plant lettuces here. Maybe I should plant cilantro because it likes a little more shade in these hot summer days. Maybe I should put my strawberries in that area so that they're getting a little less sunlight later in the year, and things like that. There's these plants that would like some of that shade. So don't discount an area completely because it gets shade. Just understand that it means that you might not want to grow tomatoes there. Particularly if you're not in the South. In the South, it may be actually helpful. So, or in California. So those things can be really helpful to understand. And I know this is confusing. So like I said, if you have questions, please drop them into the chat. The next tip that I have is if you haven't already, you need to understand your last frost date, also known as understanding your zone. But I want to add that with a caveat, and because it's not as simple as just understanding, oh, that's my last frost date, so I plant then. That's not exactly true. So a last frost date is an approximate date. Usually it moves in some way, depending on your location. Like, are you higher up? Is your altitude higher? Are you more shaded because you're in a valley? All these things will determine the difference of those things, or what that last frost date is. Even here, for instance, I'm on top of a hill, but I have a neighbor who's further down in the valley. Our last frost date is going to be different, even though we're, a quarter of a mile away from each other. I can see their house, but that also gets more, they'll have a longer frost date last frost date than we would, because we get so much sunlight and we're a little bit higher. So the air is a little warmer. You get the idea. So these are what we call, particularly in these areas like Northern Michigan and Michigan in general, where we are around, and upstate New York would be similar, parts of Ohio, even any area where there's a large body of water will be dramatically affected in terms of microclimates like that. They will be very dramatic. So a last frost date is a really general term. I have a podcast that goes really deep on this, but and I'll include it in the replay email for you because I think it's helpful. But where I was going with this is that your zone also helps you understand when to plant things, because what I find with people is we create these designs and then we don't know how to execute it. How do we make sure, because not everything goes in at one time. And this is particularly true with the planting methods that I suggest, which is utilizing intensive planting, interplanting, companion planting, all of that. Everything has a different timing, even though you're putting it in the same box. So there isn't one grand date that we put everything in our garden. It takes some observation of our area, but these guides of a zone planting chart can be really helpful. And I really suggest finding and sitting down and understanding your zone and digging into it, because it will make a huge difference in terms of understanding how to create a planting plan once you have your design together. Because your carrots are going to want to go, if you're planting carrots and tomatoes together, which you should, then your carrots need to be going in, well, they need to be going in basically 2 to 3 weeks, if not 4 weeks before your last frost date. They're going to want some of that colder soil. As soon as that soil is workable at 55, 60 degrees, you need to be seeding your carrots. And you can help them, encourage a germination by covering them with some floating row cover. It will help add some heat and then get the germination going. And then from there, you're going to have your sprouts come up of your carrots, and that will tell you, oh, those should be coming up at about the same time that I need to plant my tomatoes with them. And soon you'll start seeing how one plant will tell you how and when to plant another. And that's the beautiful thing of taking time and learning gardening over time, but everyone's a little bit different. And so understanding that zone will give you a guide, so then you can kind of move from there one step at a time. So it takes some work, but like I said, it's super helpful to just kind of start with an understanding, kind of like a roadmap. And I really think that that matters a lot in terms of our planning, because it can be really overwhelming to get to a design and then feel like, oh, I need to get this all in at the same time. And it doesn't work that way, which is great because that's really overwhelming. But how do you know when something goes in? Because even like sugar snaps, I seed them at the end of April. Even though I know I'm going to get some snow, those sugar snaps are going to taste better because they got a few snows on them. And they're going to be better plants because they're going to have a deeper root system. They're going to have more of that cold snap and resilience that they need and desire. And then they're going to be ready and beautiful and then ready to rip out or the 4th of July week. And so it's all about timing. Whereas my tomatoes aren't going to go until June 10th typically. And that's okay. So that you can see how there's a lot of variance in timing, and it all depends on your zone, your climate, and all of this. And I think that is the trickiest part of planning that a lot of people don't think about when they're putting their design together and setting the foundation and all of that is, how do I actually put together the planting timeline? But like I said, understanding that last frost date and understanding that some plants will be planted before that or direct seeded before that. Some of them will be planted or direct seeded during that last frost date, give or take a week. And some of them will be after that, up to 2 weeks. And then some of them won't be until like July when you're starting fall plantings. So if you decide to rotate crops that way. But I know there was a lot of information, so I do want to leave time to answer some questions. So Beth, I saw that you came in a little late, and that's okay. There will be a replay, so there's plenty of ability to check it out and get all of the tips. But if anyone has any questions, I would love to answer them before our time is up. I know sunlight in particular is a really confusing thing. And because we get a lot of questions about it in the community and a lot of conversations about it. So you can look up some charts online of seeing how the sun works in that angle. Like I said, it can be like a geometry equation, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. So, and it's more about understanding the general idea. But if you have a question, you can drop it in the chat. If not, no worries. I'll give you guys a few minutes in case someone's typing. And like I said, next month, there's another free workshop that will be on seed starting. So we're going to talk about my top things, like what I suggest you actually need for seed starting, if that's something you're interested in. I don't like to make a huge setup. I had a podcast episode where I actually said why I don't do much seed starting, and it's not a very popular opinion, but I do think it allows people to understand that you don't have to seed start in order to grow a great garden. Because particularly for a lot of beginners, it can be overwhelming, or if you just have a busy life right now, gardening doesn't have to be this thing that takes over your life. Even our garden, the size it is, I keep it really simple, and I use a lot of perennials in order to make it less of a giant task every year. So, wow. No questions. So what I did want to say is that because you guys joined me today, and anyone else that listens to this, I do want to offer you guys a discount code because I do have these amazing zone planting charts, and you can go in and get $28 off which is 1 month free off of a 3-month membership. So instead of $84, it would be $56. And this allows you like an all access pass for the next 3 months, basically for $54, which means you can take the beginner gardener course. You can take the seed starting course that's coming up, the companion planting course. I think that would also be included, which is coming out in April. Plus, you could jump in on any of this garden planning stuff that we'll be doing over the next 3 months, and you can check out any past learning material, as well as like about 20 plus different downloads. So there's a lot in there that you could take advantage of over the next 3 months. So if you want to check it out, this is a great time to do it. We don't really offer discount codes very often. So because we already feel like it's a great deal for everything you get. And once you get inside, you might see why. But I hope you guys check it out. I'll send all that along in the email. So just watch out for it today. And I'm really thankful you guys showed up today, and I'm excited for anyone else that catches this in the replay. You guys have been great. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can always email me. So, or if you jumped in the community, you can find me there too. Okay, you guys, I hope you have a great Friday. Thanks, Beth. You guys have a great afternoon.